uh, let's have dinner and talk about it. No, I mean a really nice dinner, a really nice bottle of wine. We really can turn out a lot of votes for your campaign if you can simply change contract law in Washington State so that the normal requirement in contract law in all other aspects of life, which is the ability to produce a wet signature document. In other words, the original, preferably in blue ink, so that you can see that it was actually signed, is gone. The powers that be are desperately trying to get this stuff through because they don't want to have the repudiation of debt. The repudiation of debt is another one of those. Here comes that Box Canyon thing. We've driven all the homeowners in, and we're about to make them all bend over, and we're going to have all their money, and we'll get the house back. But the house back is coming with all of the copper, all of the wire, some of the insulation, all the appliances, and in many cases, not even the carpets are left. So it ain't exactly a desirable repo. I think that will continue on. There was one bank last week that just announced, I think it might have been the Morgue, that announced that it was putting a moratorium on foreclosures until there are some key state legislative decisions. But the problem is not going away anytime soon. And if you saw was last week, the figures from the most credible housing numbers out there, I think, are the 20 city numbers off of Standard & Poor's Case-Shiller. If you go to S&P Case Housing Report, you can find it online. You look at that trend, and what you'll see is that, yes, we did some recovery, but now the foreclosure rates are back up, and the number of houses is on the market is such that house prices are back to the 2003 levels, and I would not be surprised at all if we didn't see housing back to the 1998 levels or even the 1970s levels before this is all over with.
George, I've kind of got a follow-up then.
Sure.
Based on your answer there. So with all this situation still kind of brewing and up in the air, what do you think the chances are that the government will end up nationalizing these banks and mortgage companies, and then the homeowners will end up paying their mortgage payments to the government?
Yeah, they already effectively did that in a sense. They already nationalized them when they started giving them my tax money. As far as I'm concerned, you know, now all the banks reportedly have given their TARP money back, but not all of them. There's a few I think that have not paid back yet. But I don't think the federal government should rightly be in the business of making loans on real estate any more than they should be in the business of making loans for student loans. I think that student loans is another area that's likely to blow up because many people go to college and university anticipating, and I was a college president, by the way, so I do speak with a little bit of background here. There's a similar train wreck of debt for all of the young people who, in good faith over the past 10 years, went to vocational and college level post-secondary ed expecting that they would be able to find a meaningful job upon graduation. And now many of these people have got $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 of government debt, and it's really owed to the government. And the government is doing things like impounding income tax refunds to get its way and so forth. I think there's a sour enough taste about borrowing money from government that people would not be lining up anytime soon to go out and borrow, be in favor of getting any more entangled at the personal finance level than is already necessary with income taxes and student loans.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate your perspective there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Thanks.
let me turn it back and ask. Let me ask you in return. I mean, if you've been screwed over on a student loan, you've lost 4 years running of tax refunds, you're working a minimum wage job, can't find a gig in some profession you've paid a lot of money to be trained in, and now the government wants to screw you over some more. How would you feel about them getting involved in a house that you're maybe barely able to hang on to? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. In fact, I'd probably try to start investigating how to change my identity.
People do that, and really that's what's going on right now. Is there's a battle about the appropriate level of government involvement. Yes, everybody wants to pay taxes to get the fire department or the police department to show up when called. And yes, everybody wants to, I think Garrison Keillor said it in Lake Wobegon, everybody wants to have students in schools that are above average. But the fact of the matter is that at some level, the intrusion of government into our daily lives does become contentious. And I guess I'm one of those people that advocates pay your taxes immediately, do not make payments, just get them out of the way, so that even if you have to live way below your standard of living that you could leverage yourself into, it's a bad deal because I could go out tomorrow and buy a new Mercedes or a new Lexus. We drive, one of our cars is 5 years old and our truck is 10 years old. No, 11 years old. We don't live at our standard of living because we would much rather live below it and be building like an iceberg, something below the waterline, own a shotgun, own a rototiller, own a piece of dirt that is free and clear and the taxes are current on, then you've got something, and that was a lesson from the last depression too. If you owned your property outright, a lot of people could make it through the last depression. And we did. I mean, we got through that as a country. It was a terrible time. And at the end of the depression comes a war. No reason to expect that this version of history won't have a similar outcome, because at some point the whole purpose of a war is to, what? Kill people and destroy production capacity. And if you kill people and destroy production capacity, then you've got a framework which can support future growth. And I know that sounds horrible, but them's is how it is.
Thanks, Georgie, and build demand up. Uranus, you've got a question for George?
Hello, George. How are you?
Well, I'm overworked.
Great.
Go ahead.
Great answers, by the way. It's wonderful. I have a question from a member of the forum, Bluebird. Isn't it time for a new economic model, more like Martin Armstrong's Pi Cycle, where he says that bonds and governments will tank, not stocks and commodities?
Yeah. When somebody says to me a new business model, to me, all businesses have two elements in common. All businesses have the cost of goods sold and the cost of making the goods. That's your top line. And then you've got that's your middle line. And then you've got your profit or your sales, which is your top line. So the only difference in fundamental business models is what happens to any profit or loss. In communism, the assets, the whole model was theoretically owned by the workers. But of course that never actually happened because Russian-style communism was pretty much a Western put-up job anyway, and it was failed when it was appropriate to fail it. the Western for-profit model says that the private company or private corporation is the owner of the sales and of the means of production, the machinery and so plant and equipment, and that any profit should accrue to the corporation, which will then, as it sees fit, distribute those profits out to a number of shareholders. And they may have a couple of different classes of shareholders of different preference, some Class A shareholders, some Class B shareholders, some preferred and so forth, as well as to bondholders and so on. Now, when Armstrong talks about his model, which I'm not really familiar with, it strikes me that it's almost like the cooperative model, which is where a bunch of cooperating humans owns the sales, owns the means of production, and shares on almost a share basis, as ships used to sail under a shares basis. And they still do in a few industries, like the crab industry in Alaska. Don't know if you know how boat shares work in that, but very, very workable system. The boat gets 2 shares, the captain gets 2 shares, the first mate gets 1 share or 1.5, and so forth. And so things are divided up on a share basis. I think that we will move to that kind of a system over time. Dr. Jack Lessinger, who's a retired professor emeritus from the University of Washington, wrote a wonderful book called The Coming Prosperity of 2020, in which he envisioned something he calls responsible capitalism. I've talked to Jack many times. We are a little different in our interpretation because I think that capitalism has enough seeds of its own destruction from greed and abuse, and I'd hold up Madoff as only the most recent of the examples of this, and also the bankrupting of the countries of Portugal, Greece, Ireland, yada, 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 as other examples. But I think there's enough incentive to do crooked to make money in pure corporate capitalism that responsible capitalism may be really hard to do. But I've written about this a few times, both on Peoplenomics and in Urban Survival. The cooperative business model offers a little bit of hope, because the cooperative business model, like Ace Hardware is a good example. Another good example, and it's in the field of healthcare, is Group Health Cooperative up in Seattle. There are a number of cooperatives in healthcare that do extremely well by their patients on average, which is not to say they don't run into ethical issues. Group Health has, like any other healthcare organization, they've got difficult metering of care considerations for very elderly people. My mother lived to be 93, and yet I was actually very happy she had Group Health, a cooperative